Our final fireside chat of the day will discuss the future of rapid defense acquisition. The platforms needed to deter adversaries aren't fielded out of thin air. Rather, the acquisition community is the tip of the spear in ensuring that critical materials are actually delivered to the warfighter. The US has the opportunity to use the acquisition process to build a technological advantage, and we couldn't have two better individuals to discuss this. Tara will moderate a conversation with our guest, the Honorable Radha Plumb, who serves as the current Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Tara and Dr. Plumb, welcome to the stage.
Okay, here we are. Very excited to have you here, Radha. Thank you so much.
Delighted.
My friend, my former colleague, and now the Honorable Dr. Radha Plumb. This is going to be a great chat, so thanks for making the time. Welcome to the Anthem.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me live out my not-so-secret rock star ambitions by sitting on a super cool stage.
Absolutely, yes. Next time we'll give you a handheld mic and you can pace.
I really need one of those things. I won't break out dance moves, I promise.
Excellent. I would love to start by just touching on and then perhaps maybe uncovering some layers on one of the most exciting things that I think has come out of the department recently and was launched out of your office, Acquisition and Sustainment, which is the first ever National Industrial Base Strategy. It strikes me that the moment to address this is certainly upon us. Starting with a plan is always a good idea, something DoD actually does quite well. So are you happy with it? What do you think is most important for people to pay attention to in the strategy? What do you think it got right?
So let me start by saying I'm just so proud of the whole team that worked on it and pulled it together. We're very fortunate to have a great industrial base policy team and a newly structured Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial Base Policy, and that has really allowed us to coalesce around more concrete actions and plans. I think what is notable about the strategy is it really starts, as all things in the Department of Defense, really taking the 2022 NDS, National Defense Strategy, as its North Star, and trying to lay out in very concrete terms the challenges, the potential solutions, and how we're approaching it in a systematic way, and then really codifying the risks to not implementing it to create a call for action on a sort of generational change we need on kind of how we view the industrial base and how that can support the national defense strategy and more generally our national security pieces. But look, I mean, the devil's in the details in terms of implementation. So where we are now is looking at, okay, we've got a strategy, we've got a North Star, we've got a plan on what we need to do. Now, for me, sort of in the Deputy Undersecretary roles, how do we make that real? What are the actions we need to take? What are the policy changes? What are the investments? What are the engagements? And that's really going to be laid out in an implementation plan. Now, that plan itself is going to be classified, but sort of a core element of the NDIS is the need for this partnership between the government and industry. And so we're looking at how we can provide really granular information to our partners in industry on where we're focusing and how we're going to be implementing, and that's what you'll see in the coming months. So it's a strategy to guide us and help explain some of the individual actions, but coming out of the department, and what I'm most excited about is really the different steps we're going to be taking to make it real and kind of drive that change.
Will there be an unclassified aspect of it or portions of it? Because I think you make a very important point, which is DoD can't just talk to itself about this challenge. Actually, the stakeholders are out beyond the five-sided building.
Yep, that's right. And so, yes, there absolutely will be unclassified ways in which we will share how we are approaching implementation, both on the policy setting and on the sort of investments and prioritization. And you know, that will be an ongoing conversation. But pulling back, you know, we actually have laid into place over the last few years, since coming in 2021, a number of really concrete ways in which we engage with industry, be it from sort of senior level engagements with both defense primes and defense and non-traditional sort of new entrants, whether it's systematic industry engagements or all the way down to our Apex accelerators and expanding small business programs. So we have those touch points to clearly signal sort of our priorities and our sort of where the department's headed. Now, what we're trying to layer on top of that is concretely what I think many people euphemistically call demand signals, what I think really means contracts and dollars. And so tightening those contracting timelines, being transparent about what contracts are out, and making clear kind of where the dollars are going to flow and not.
Yes. Okay, I want to come back to demand signals a little bit later, but you mentioned something important that is so true after you've written a strategy. When those things are such a slog in the department, you feel like you can let your foot off the gas and celebrate a little bit, but you cannot, because it is just a shelfware document unless there's a plan to implement it. So that's excellent. And to resource it. So will Congress provide the department with any new resources in order to execute this strategy?
Well, look, I think we're hopeful that Congress will at some point here in fiscal year 2024 pass a fiscal year 2024 appropriations to allow us to execute the strategy. And this strategy did inform, as all our strategies do in the department, our continual investments and planning for the budget cycle. But sort of pulling back a little, I think these types of delays, the sort of uncertainty generated by short-term continuing resolutions, mean that a lot of the things envisioned in the strategy, multi-year procurements, new starts with new technologies, they get delayed. And as we have continuing resolution upon continuing resolution, those delays get compounded. Those compounding delays really have impacts not just on our initial providers and suppliers and prime kind of tier suppliers, but also sub-tier suppliers, most of whom can't actually withstand that kind of level of uncertainty and delay. And that's where you just see these compounding impacts of continuing resolution. So I think one core element in the NDIS, and one thing we really need to partner with industry on, is driving a much more predictable and reliable appropriations process in Congress that really makes sure we're getting those budgets passed in a way that allows industry and the department to meet our national security requirements.
I do think predictable is exactly the right word. I think predictability is actually more important than the timelines themselves. Because if you establish timelines and then uphold them, then whether you're a business or you're another component of the department or you're a program office, you can plan for it. The lack of predictability creates the uncertainty and certainly the ripple effects that we see in the industrial base, to include beyond just those of us who are focused on the defense technology sector, but into the supply base, where a lot of those companies don't even realize that their products are making their way to defense programs.
That's right. And I think a lot of our sort of investments and delays in delivery timelines end up, again, compounding when 3 or 4 tiers down, you have a critical mineral or a key component that's produced somewhere else needs to get incorporated in, and those can't be produced because you can't get the contract to the prime, they can't get the contract to the supplier, they can't get this contract to their sub-tier. We don't have money for transportation, we don't have money to support investments in the down the chain sub-tier base, right? All of those delays can add up to 12, 18, 24, 36 months, and now you're looking at a capability that should be delivered in 2026, not coming online until what, 28, 30, 32? And if you look at the timelines for kind of things like our pacing challenge, that's late to need,
right,
by a long shot.
Right, unacceptable actually. Yeah, absolutely. So we just heard a phenomenal conversation between our chairman, Bob Work, and the director of CAPE, Susanna Bloom. Susanna is hopeful, dare I say optimistic, that we might have, that might be too strong, we'll see what she says to that we will get one more short-term continuing resolution, but then see an appropriation after that. Are you optimistic about that?
I guess I'm in the acquisition community of a miserly bent, and I will believe it when I see it. We've put out our demand signal for an appropriation, and I'm hoping that it's met by Congress.
Yes, excellent. Okay, good. Let's go back to the topic about going beyond the traditional defense contractors and, beyond the primes, which has certainly been a theme of today across a lot of our discussions. The way I often think about it is the very first aspect of the challenge, or the first challenge itself, in working with non-traditional defense companies was first and foremost just accessing them. And in that regard, I think DIUX actually was quite successful at this, which then created a second problem, which is getting those companies to work with DoD. And I think you were at Google and some of that. So you've seen both sides, which is really interesting. We've come a long way since then, although I'd be curious for your reaction just to that dynamic. And I would say that now the third challenge we're facing is scaling those companies, or scaling the application of their products to the benefit of the warfighter and for the benefit of American national security. Does the new strategy, NDIS, address this third challenge? And if so, how?
Yeah, so let me just take a step back for a moment, and then I'll step directly into the NDIS from that point, which is to say, no secret, the National Defense Strategy itself lays out China as a pacing challenge with acute challenges from Russia and persistent threats from places like Iran. You are seeing that right now, right? So we are literally living in the threat picture predicted by the National Defense Strategy in 2022, in the sense that and in that sense, it's really important to kind of return to our first principles. So a lot of times, we look at China and the dollars investment it puts into its private sector, into innovation, and kind of look at that civil-military fusion, that ability for them to move from private innovation all the way through to military applications in a seamless way. And we try to think about ways to replicate or copy that or scale that or implement that. Like, what's our version of that? I think that's the wrong frame. Our enduring and competitive advantage is and always will be a robust industrial base that isn't streamlined into the government, right? Like, that's a feature, not a bug, and we don't want to break that. Because ultimately, the greatest innovation, the new ideas, the competition for dollars and for creative solutions outside of the government's realm is what drives that kind of economic innovation. So what we need to do, and what the National Defense Industrial Strategy, the NDIS, is really looking at is how do we make it less hard to, once you got a thing that we know has military application, how do we make that leap easier? How do we make it shorter, smoother? How do we put a, rocket pack on your back to jump over the valley of death? Like, whatever the right analogy is. And that is really where we are focused, which is how do we create the processes to do that? We have some things, tools at our disposal. We have a lot of authorities Congress has given us. We've applied them in the adaptive acquisition framework. So we have a mechanism there. We have sort of folks like DIU, as you noted. We have things like CyberSitter. And now, as Dr. LaPlante, Undersecretary for A&S, would say, now the focus, to your point, is on how do we deliver at speed and scale. And that's where we spend the majority of our time, which is, if we've got this flow of ideas, we've got the initial contract phase, where are the kinks that stop a kind of steady flow from coming in? And that's really what programs like our Competitive Advantage Pathfinder are looking at. And you'll see that reflected in the NDIS, which is, where are the kinks in the hose? Let's kind of take a Kool-Aid Man approach on specific technologies, break through those barriers, deliver technology to the field, but also in doing that, identify where are the kinks? Is it our continuous ATO process? I know, we're working on it. Got it. Is it the timeline to get into the program manager's office and making sure we get the PMs and the PEOs in early stages once we have high TRL technologies? Like, where are those kinks, and let's solve them. I will say, I hope it comes across in the NDIS. I will say it explicitly here. There's not a silver bullet. Like, there's not if we just had this law, if we just changed this thing, that's not how it works. It is just, acquisition professionals having the training and support they need to really accelerate things with the demand signal from the warfighter and the support from department leadership, and that's really the system we're trying to set up.
Yeah, let's touch for 1 minute on the workforce, because I read recently, I think it might have been this fall, just not too long before the holidays, I think you spoke at the Defense Acquisition University, and I saw a little bit about your remarks, which I applaud. And to paraphrase quickly, you said, you know, a lot of people talk about how the system is broken and the challenges in acquisition, and surely there is a lot to fix. All of us agree. We're having an entire event about it. But there are tremendously talented, dedicated professionals who are part of this workforce, and that is worth not losing sight of. I think that is absolutely true. And the contracting officers out there take a lot of flack for a lot of things, but these people are meant to be business advisors to the requirements owner. So how are you thinking about the acquisition workforce, and are there opportunities? Do you think we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, great. I will just echo what you said, which is we are incredibly fortunate to have end-to-end lifecycle management, acquisition, product managers, product support officers on the sustainment side. Every time you see a ship, look at a munition, a warfighter fires a weapon, that is because of the acquisition and sustainment community. And I think, you know, they get a lot of flack. These are people who show up every single day behind the scenes and are delivering capabilities to the warfighters. Now these
people are our users.
Yes.
Yes, we want to help them too.
And, you know, for us, it's really making sure they have the tools they need, the modernized training and support, and then that they understand that they have the top cover to take the risks they need to take to deliver capability. So some concrete things we're doing. We just had we're working on a workforce framework that helps us sort of prioritize and modernize a number of elements of our training curriculum. We did that in November. We're gonna look to finalize that in about February, and then work to try to align our curriculum to that effort. The intent there is to really have training materials built on sort of business school case studies and specific models, some of which taken from competitive advantage pathfinders and from other elements, to demonstrate how you kind of ninja your way through this acquisition system. What I'll say is, you know, to kind of sum up my view on this is, a lot of times people say the acquisition system is broken, you know, it doesn't work, we need to smash this or that, and they want us to run with scissors. You know, I have small children, do not run with scissors. It is not a good idea. Someone is going to get hurt. But what I think it's like is like running in heels. Is it the most efficient and comfortable way to get from one place to another? Absolutely not. If you're running late and you need to make a bus, can you do it? Absolutely. And we need to kind of build the system and build the workforce so that they can run in heels to get things to the warfighters that need.
Well, I personally love that analogy. So I am all for that. And I wasn't kidding about those professionals that you identified, item managers, product support officers, lifecycle managers. Those are our users of the ARC. And the reason we built this system is because that community has been so starved of modern technology to do their jobs. And yet you connected two things that I really tried to emphasize this morning, and you did it in a better and pithier way, which is those are the people who ultimately create the system that is the operational capability. And we have to start thinking about the acquisition process in that way, not as a back office job. So, okay, so let's stay on the ARC for a second, because I want to pull up something on the screen that we actually pulled directly from the platform, and I won't ask you anything specific about that, Radha. I just want to share with the audience that view. What this analytic highlights is the connectivity between DoD platforms and their OEMs or primes, the suppliers behind them, and ultimately China. And I just have to ask about where acquisition and sustainment is as an organization on supply chain risk management and supply chain resilience these days. It seems that there has been a proliferation of activity across the department, especially in leading program offices who post-pandemic said, enough is enough. We have to get our arms around this. We have to think about this a different way. And then we talked to other program offices who are saying, we are awaiting guidance from OSD. I won't express any judgments on that approach, but I understand where they're coming from. So will there be central guidance? There has been some work out of ANS on this, and is an enterprise-wide mandate in terms of how supply chain risk management is handled. Is that the right answer?
I'll just start with, I generally think enterprise-wide guidance from OSD is not something that anyone is looking for, including OSD. And that's really, and what I mean by that, that's not in the extreme true, but in the specifics, though, a kind of one size fits all on how you're going to risk manage is not really what we're looking to do. Okay. Now, in the NDIS, we lay out kind of the importance of supply chain risk management, and this is really a partnership we have to do with industry. Like, we are not going to solve this on the government side. So what you'll see coming out of us is a more nuanced approach. You know, about a month and a half ago, I think I went to an event that President Biden hosted, looking across the cabinet on how we're looking at supply chain, kind of led by Department of Commerce, to have data frameworks, illumination frameworks that allow us to try to look down at the levels we can from inside the government and identify where there are shared risks or where there are pockets of risk we need to get after. I think that's kind of the approach that we are seeing as effective in some program offices across DoD, and that's something in OSD we want to support through sort of some of our data work and our supply chain illumination tools. I think in addition to that, there are going to be key elements. Critical minerals are a good example, supply chain risk. Microelectronics, which I spend a good amount of my time on, another example of where there are key inputs into our ecosystem that we have got to get right, both in terms of how they're supplied and having an assured supply of those into our systems, and better aligning our technology roadmaps on what we're looking for from program offices with the development and delivery roadmaps from those key inputs, to make sure we don't have one waiting on the other and are missing the opportunity to either accelerate capability advancements or integrate more advanced capabilities into the final end product. So I think the other big area you'll see is our effort to, in key supply chain elements, key sectors, identify more clear strategies that marry up the sub-tier suppliers with our prime integrators ahead of capability delivery.
Does A&S feel like the department has access to the data that it needs to be able to make those linkages today, or is that a work in progress?
I think that's a work in progress. I think, look, I'm a data person, so my view is like we could always use more data, and we welcome industry sharing their data with us on their sub-tier, and we welcome industry taking seriously illuminating their own supply chains and kind of tracking that at that level. We do have some guidance and rulemaking on that I think will help drive some of that progress. But certainly, look, we're not, our data journey is earlier. We are earlier in the data journey than one might have thought in the year 2024, and we'll continue to accelerate progress on that, but we need to accelerate progress on it.
I think we have time for one last question. So I have to ask about the other big announcement that has come out of the department in recent months, which is Replicator. It's been addressed on a few different panels today, and I think at this point, at least in this community, we feel like we have a rough understanding of what it is. So given that this is really about a process, do you see Replicator as one of those mechanisms that you just referred to where we can leapfrog capabilities across that valley of death? Where does the process stand at this point? Is it up and running? And what can we expect here in the future?
Yeah, so what I'd say about Replicator is I think you've seen the department have a number of initiatives that are, for lack of a better term, I'll just go back to that kind of unkinking the hose, right? Which is getting that flow, getting that accelerated process. You saw it on the sort of concept to capability side with Radar through the research and engineering team. I already talked about our CAP, Competitive Advantage Pathfinder, and Replicator provides another process improvement for us to figure out if we want to get to scale, leave the specific capability side. If you want to get to scale, you have a known kind of requirement. How do you walk your way through that process? And yeah, that process on a specific capability is underway. I think that is helping us both deliver that capability, but I think for us in the acquisition community, more importantly, it helps us see where are the kinks, where if I want to accelerate, where am I running into blockers, and I need to figure out how to make those processes more streamlined, more compatible with warfighter requirements and speed up the process, or where can it not be compressed, right? There's going to be some, what I will call acquisition physics here, And then let's create that predictability to say, okay, if you need something, the minimum amount of time is going to be this. There are some uncompressible parts here. And let's talk about that, because I think, to hearken to your earlier point, there are some pieces here where, you know, we want predictability. We want to support good acquisition policy, faithful stewardship of taxpayer dollars. And we always want to balance that with warfighter needs. So I think what Replicator, but again, as kind of part of this broader set of initiatives, really led from the top down, from the Secretary and Deputy, to help us figure out how we unkink the hose, how we get this flywheel going, and we can do that with we will do that with a specific capability to figure out how to do it. But that really helps us in the broader acquisition community figure out how to scale that across different capabilities and different platforms and programs.
Yes. Well, Dr. Plumb, you are a data person. You are clear-eyed, very sobering thoughts, but you actually give me hope. And thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.